the risk-reward ratio for being in gold, silver, and the shares is off the charts.
Friday, March 4th, 2022, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So today we have a different setup. I'm going to talk to Bill Murphy, the chairman of GATA, and then we're going to look at where the markets are. So Bill, welcome to the channel again. You've been on a few times, and I couldn't think of a better person to come on and talk about what's going on in gold, what's been going on in gold for the last 25 years or so, and actually what it has to do with Russia. So Bill, welcome. And maybe if you could tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and GATA, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, thanks for having me, Mario. Good to see you. And I've been at this for 23 years. I started my website, the Metropole Cafe, and then complained about the suppression of the gold price. And we thought it was bullion banks at the time. And a supporter of mine, a follower, a guy named Chris Powell, said, well, we got to do something about it. And so we formed GATA. I'm chairman, he's secretary treasurer, does all the work. And we've been fighting to expose this thing for 23 years. And it's the most obvious thing in the history of mankind. And nobody outside of some people like you will talk about it because it's about the bullion banks, the US government, against all the money and power in the world. And it couldn't have been more obvious what has happened this past year when gold has done nothing. Silver's gone down. It's been the most bullish fundamentals in the history of the gold silver markets. Everything I've known was thrown out the window. I still expect gold to explode and silver to go bonkers. But every day we watch them come in and they're just doing everything they can to suppress the price. And it's beyond frustrating and it gets me angry, as you can probably tell, because I know what should be happening and would be if we didn't have such a corrupt thing going on.
Yes, at the same time, I think the only way they can keep this Ponzi scheme going is through suppressing the gold price. But maybe you could explain how it started back in the mid-90s with Larry Summers and also all the leases that they use, the central banks and the bullion banks, and how they leverage, because people don't understand how they actually do it. So I think you'd be the best person to explain that.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when I got involved in this, I worked with a guy named Frank Veneroso, and he had written the Gold Book. And in it, he said that he learned through various sources that the central banks had let out 8,000 tons, it was 8,000 tons of gold. And that it was leased out to various sources. And then long-term capital management, the famed or infamous hedge fund, blew up. And we got word that they were short hundreds of tons of gold. And they would have to cover those positions because they had to liquidate everything. So that would have really but devastated a lot of the bullion banks. So they took over their positions. And that's when I was noticing right after, in September of 1998, that the gold price wouldn't go above 300. I kept knocking it down. Then 6 months later, we heard the Bank of England sold half their gold reserves in advance and announced it to everybody. No one had ever done anything like that before. And it confirmed for a lot of people like James Turk that GATA was correct, that the gold market is being rigged. And then we realized as time went by, they were rigging the silver market. And that's gone on ever since. Now, as you know, the next decade, for at least from 2001, excuse me, to 2011 was terrific. And ever since then, it's been nothing. They've just clamped down completely. And it's been very frustrating. And again, I'm heavily invested in gold, silver, and the shares, and disgusted at watching what the bad guys keep doing.
Yes, and one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with you is because in 2005, GATA organized Gold Rush 21. I think it was in the Klondike. And
Yes.
I remember watching the video and reading about it because I've been following you, I think since 2002, because I bought my first gold coins back then. And I noticed right away that the price moves were strange in the gold market because I worked in the financial markets and I followed it. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about the one of the participants or one of the guys that attended the conference from Russia. And I found that really interesting because after 2005, it was a period when we saw Russia actually start to accumulate a lot of gold.
Well, it's funny when you bring that up because his name was Andrei Bykov, just a terrific guy, very religious man. And he said he's been in contact with my colleague, Chris Powell, who I mentioned, said it was the best conference he was ever at. And you're right. Right after that, the price of gold began to go up. It went from, what was it, I don't know, 300, 350 at the time to over 700, which was a big move at the time. And he feels he believes that God is 100% correct and realized how suppressed the price was then, and Russia took advantage of it. Now, of course, what's going on now, who the heck knows? But he is really quite a guy and gave God much credit.
And he was an advisor to the Russian government?
Various sources, yes, and he knows all the big players in Russia.
Yeah, and the reason I'm talking about this is not to give people the impression that we want to see Russia come and squeeze the gold market, so to speak, and so we can make money. But it's more of a weapon, I think, that they could use. Do you think the Russians know about the bullion bank scheme to suppress the gold price?
Just mentioned, they know all about it through Andrei Bykov and other people. They followed gold very well, as probably in the Chinese also, which I used to get into in the past. But yeah, nobody wants gold to go up for the reason you're talking about. You're so right. At the same time, it should have exploded, I don't know, 500, 1,000 already. Just for paper money that the U.S. government gave away last year, $30 trillion in debt, inflation going off the charts. You take a look at a wheat chart, an oil chart, a copper chart, then you look at gold and silver and go, what's the matter?
Yeah.
I know what's the matter. That part of me, just shut up. It's what we've learned over the years about when they want to really suppress the price, they go bonkers.
So now with the Russians being sanctioned, they've kind of blocked them from SWIFT. Some of the banks, their central bank reserves are being neutralized. I think about 300 billion they can't use. What do you think are the possibilities that now, because Russia and China, they've accumulated probably enough gold now to be able to say, we've had enough of this dollar system and we want to have our own system. I think Putin has been saying for the last, 10 years or so that the dollar, reserve system is doomed because they're using it as a weapon for sanctions. And I'm not going to get into what's going on right now. I just want to analyze so maybe people can realize that this is also not just dangerous for Russia's finances, which are pretty bad right now in the short term, but also for the Western U.S. finances, because if something happens, if this gold rigging stops because the Russians and the Chinese actually say, oh, we want to start our own gold-backed system, it could bring down a lot of the bullion banks and it could bring down the whole financial system. So it's actually very dangerous. And we're actually trying to warn people. How do you feel? What do you think could happen, Bill?
Well, it's a $64,000 question, as they used to say. But it's scary as can be, and anything can happen because I know how suppressed the gold and silver prices are and where they should be. It's what I write about every day. Last year, almost every single day, the bad guys, as I call them, bombed the gold and silver prices around between 6 and 9 in the morning, every day. And it took its toll on the price, and now it's been creeping back up. And of course, nobody was expecting what Russia did, and probably least of all the gold cartels, I call it. And it could be a major league problem because of the leases we just talked about, the gold isn't in the banks. And my take has been all year, suffering through this, is that gold and silver go bananas when this gold cartel runs out of enough physical gold to meet what they're doing in the paper markets with their raids. You never know when that's going to be, and it'll happen unexpectedly and overnight, and anything can happen on the upside. Gold and silver have never been cheaper, especially silver, in all of history. Cheap. You know, the CRB index going up 25% in the first 2 months of the year. Gold's done nothing and silver's down, huh? So it's, and as far as Russia goes, who knows what they have in mind? I mean, how can you read a guy like Putin after what he just did? You know, one of the most heinous things in the history of the world. So what they have in mind, you don't know. I mean, I don't know. And there's some people say, well, they could be suffering and they have to dump gold so the gold price go down. And then what we're talking about, they can use it as the one weapon they have to go against the West. It's scary.
Yeah, and I saw an article came out. Well, it wasn't an article, but it was a report by Zoltan Pozar. I don't know if you've heard of him. He used to work for the New York Fed, and he now works for Credit Suisse. And he's the repo specialist guy. And he came out on the 28th of February and wrote a report for the Credit Suisse clients saying that shutting Russia out of the whole international monetary system could actually backfire on the dollar. And he actually mentions gold. And he said that Russia could use gold because he said gold doesn't have any counterparty risk. And he said gold is king, a guy from, one of the bullion banks, even though I don't think he trades bullion. So I thought that was interesting.
Absolutely. And the thing I can't stress enough, nobody knows, because most people won't talk about the gold price suppression scheme. They don't even deal with it, no matter what evidence we give them, no matter how the markets trade. I mean, oil up at 115 today, and gold was going nowhere from its over Comex close, and silver was down. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I saw that.
It's a joke. And the joke can end at any time. We don't know when. There's no doubt in my mind that gold and silver are going to go bonkers. But I can't predict when, because it all has to do with the bad guys running out of supply, or Russia and China just say, we're going to change the game.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to predict either, but I think if ever there was a time where it could happen, it would be through changing the game. I think it's still early days. It looks like the Chinese are aligning themselves with the Russians, so it is possible.
Yeah, well, I know the Chinese know what GATA knows, because I wrote about it many years ago, and certain comments that they made. I forget the exact details right now, but they know exactly the same drill as Russia does of what the Western central banks have done to the gold and silver prices. Even
though the general commodities have outperformed gold this year, gold and silver is still up about 6%, I think, year to date. And we're seeing the stock market and the bond market suffer. So I think we are like on the cusp of a major move in gold and silver as well. And actually, some people are scared that if there's a crash in the stock market, that gold and silver are going to go down. But this year, we've seen the stock markets go down quite a bit, and gold and silver and even the miners are starting to do well.
Well, I mean, again, I'm the most bullish guy going and the most angry guy going, because it hasn't happened. As I mentioned, it can happen at any time and will surprise people. The risk-reward ratio for being in gold, silver, and the shares is off the charts. I mean, the HUI was over 600 10 years ago. It's 290 today. Are you kidding me? There's been some great winners in the gold sector for sure, but it's been really tough. And I cannot stress enough. Can't say when, but being in gold and silver is so much more of a comforting thing to be in right now, and the shares, than being in the stock market or other investment vehicles. And it will pay off mega, and it'll surprise people on how high these prices will go.
Going on to the Comex a little bit, because with the open interest, I think is quite high, and the shorts have, the bullion banks are still massively short. Do you think it's possible they could use the excuse of force majeure to cancel all the contracts if we start seeing gold go through, let's say, 2000, which is not that far away?
It's a great point. anything can happen with the CFTC and the Comex because they're all part of the fraud. Chris Marcus did a great job exposing the CFTC last year that when they had the silver squeeze, they tamped this word. CFTC said, we have to tamp this down. What do you mean? They didn't do it to GameStop or the other stocks, the Reddit stocks that went nuts. And silver actually went down instead of going up. And it's been a horror show ever since. So they can do anything. They're as corrupt as can be. But it will, no matter what, if that ever happens, you won't be able to buy physical gold and silver. Their prices will still go nuts, and the share prices will go bananas to the upside. So no matter if they do that, I think it will backfire on them.
I see. And the LBMA as well in London, I think they're part of this club as well, because it was, I think, yesterday, gold, I think before 5:30 a.m. Eastern time, gold was trading around 1940, and then all of a sudden it just dumped to 1912.
Bombs away, I call it. Bombs away.
Yeah,
bombs away.
And that was just before the 10:30 a.m. fix in London. So what I think happened is the bullion banks sold the futures, thousands of lots on the Comex. Comex trades almost 24/7, and then they fix the physical price on the LBMA, which is used globally for like refiners, dealers, jewelers, and they must have fixed it around 1920, 1918 instead of 1940. So they robbed these people of millions of dollars potentially. So yeah, the LBMA, Comex, the bullion banks, they're all part, even though LBMA is in London, they work together with the New York banks. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely right. Been talking about it for a long time. It's so obvious, such a big deal. And of course, it'll only get exposed like the Enron scandals or Bernie Madoff when it blows up. Then when it blows up, everybody says, oh, I knew all about that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. Bill, we're going to keep an eye on these markets, especially gold and silver. And thank you very much for coming on the channel. And yeah, I hope to speak to you again. Take care.
Mario, I appreciate you thinking of me. And we all want gold and silver to go bonkers, but we don't want it because of the war, as you said. It's just a shame.
So it's 8:10 a.m. London time. Before we look at the markets this morning, just want to make a few comments about what Bill Murphy said in our interview. Yes, I sense his frustration with the price action of gold and silver in the last 10 years and the fact that gold and silver are still being suppressed here at the moment, despite the fact that commodities are going through the roof. But I would say that back in 2008, when gold reached $1,000, and I think silver was just above 20, that's where it got to 21 or thereabouts. The CRB made a high of 466 or thereabouts, the Commodity Research Bureau Index, the CRB Index. It's an index, a basket of all commodities, all major commodities, gold and silver included. And if you look at this chart, right now we're at 307. So we're nowhere near the high of 08. And yet gold has gone from 1,000 to almost 2,000 right now, while we got up to above 2,000 in 2020. Silver, of course, I think is the granddaddy of suppression. We're still here around 25, even though we'd been at 21 in 2008. We've been at 50 in 2011. We were at 50 in 1980. So what do I think happened in 2011? Because as the chart shows here, the CRB did not make a new high, while gold and silver went gangbusters. Well, there's an analyst called Rosen, and I'm going to put a link below in the description to what he writes about which is the running flat correction. And he basically thinks what happened in 2011 was that gold and silver were forecasting a massive hyperinflation going forward. And that's why they did so well in 2011. Yes, they have come back down, but that's part of the running flat correction, which was a correction upwards from, he actually thinks that the top in gold is still the top in 2008 at 1,030 or thereabouts. It might sound weird that that's the top for him, but yes, you did sense that Bill Murphy, he's been watching this since the late 90s. It was because of him that I've stuck to gold. I don't think I probably would have kept any of my gold if I didn't know what was going on. And the fact that when this basically scam unravels, and the scam, of course, is the gold price suppression, but by the powers that be through the bullion banks, when that unravels, it's going to be biblical, I think. What's going to happen? Well, it's going to be the collapse of the fiat currencies, the dollar included. So one thing I would say, yeah, patience. I've been waiting 20 years. And despite that, the gold price has gone from about $300 to where we're now. So, and in pounds, it's gone from 200 to almost 1,500. So I'm not complaining, but I can see how some people are frustrated. So with that, let's look at where the markets are this morning. As I said, now it's about 8:15 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 1935.50. That's unchanged. High's been 1951 and the low 1929. Silver, yes, still being suppressed here. It's down 7 cents at 25.10. The high has been 25.37, the low 25.04. I'm going to skip to copper right now and the other commodities, and then we'll come back to the stock market and the currencies, because I wanted to show you this chart of copper. Copper seems to be breaking out, and you would think that copper and silver should be closely related in terms of the industrial side of things, because silver is like a byproduct of a lot of copper mines. And and you can see how manipulated silver is, because copper is breaking out again here. We're breaking out of the 2011 high and the 2008 high. We're almost close to breaking the all-time high that was reached last year in May. So yeah, you can see how silver is really a steal, I would say. Yes, physical, that is. We need to take the physical out of the market. That's the only way to help end this paper game. So there you go. Copper looking very good. I think the level to break on the upside, it looks like 490, which we're pretty close to. So right now, high-grade copper up another 0.75% at 481. U.S. nat gas is up 1.2%. Crude oil has come off from the highs yesterday. I think the WTI high was 115. Right now it's unchanged at 106.40. Brent is at 109.97. And we're just quickly going to look at wheat. This chart is pretty scary. And I've got a daily chart here. You can see what wheat did. I think it was up 12% yesterday in Chicago. So this is the daily chart, and then I'll show you a weekly chart. It's still nowhere near the high we saw in 2008. Well, it's getting very close. So interesting times. So to the stock market. And today, of course, we got non-farm payroll at 8:30 a.m. New York or 1:30 p.m. London. We'll see what that number brings. The Dow future right now is down 81 points. NASDAQ is down only 8, and S&P is down 8 points as well. FTSE is down 67 points. So the FTSE is lost a lot of ground. We were around 7,500 a few weeks ago. We're now at 71.62. Sterling is down 0.25%, 133.13. The euro is down 0.5%, just above 110. So euro not looking great. The dollar yen is unchanged, 115.43, and the dollar yuan is unchanged as well, 632.23. Aussie dollar up 0.5%, 73.59. The dollar is up 0.2 versus the Canadian dollar though, 127.07, and the Kiwi dollar is up 0.5% as well, 68.28. Yeah, for some reason they're not quoting. My broker, the system I use, has stopped quoting the ruble, but let me check here on the screen. USD RUB, see where we are. Well, the ruble, the last quote I have is 108, so $1 is buying 108 rubles. Prior to the crisis, I think we were in the mid 70s, so the ruble has dropped quite a lot. And to finish off, the 10-year yield, well, that's down about 3.5 basis points at 1.81%. The 2-year note is down 2 basis points at 1.51%. So you can see that, yeah, the curve is continuing to flatten. It's the spread there's only 30 basis points now. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below here. I wish you all a great weekend. Take care. Bye.